And we're back. Sports Next Door. Myself, Owen, alongside my virtual neighbor, Max. And we are here to talk some basketball storylines with you. It has been an absolutely audacious week in the NBA. And there are so many things that we need to talk about and get to, but we will begin with something that we brought up a couple podcasts ago
I think it
about,
was the last one.
yeah, something like that, about the officiating of the NBA and how Trae Young specifically is a talented foul creator. And funny that in response to a lot of complaints from that game, we see a Woj bomb happen on Tuesday where a NBA competition committee met and decided that they are going to put forward to the board of governors of the NBA and the general managers a proposed rule change that would not enable players to get it away with unnatural motions on jump shots that players use to draw fouls. So essentially, the rule is changing so that if I'm jumping into someone or jumping to the side and putting up a shot or whatever else might happen, I'm sure they have a couple in particular that they're looking at. Those will be eliminated, and so you're taking away some of the artistry that is the offensive players, but you're also um, making the game a little less herky jerky and a little bit less frustrating for fans who don't want to see that type of basketball.
Hopefully, you're forcing them to focus that artistry in getting the ball in the basket rather than getting players' hands on top of them.
Yeah, the biggest one that I've heard about and I agree with that is probably the most dangerous one is where guys like Trae, Harden, Mitchell, Luca, they come around a high screen and they've got a defender of pretty large size, right? Working their way around a center, working their butt off, moving as quickly as possible, trying to fight around that screen. And they come around that screen and bam, their guy is standing right there, backing his way into you. And so it creates those dangerous situations for the defending player where they're working their way around the screen. They don't know exactly where the offensive player is until they get around the screen, and they're moving as quickly as they can because they're trying to pick up, and then they just have a wall coming back at them. And so it leads to some collisions. We haven't seen anything too particularly brutal yet, but it was something where I agreed with what I had heard that it's a fairly dangerous situation, and that's something that can be eliminated. You're allowed to protect the ball when you're in the lane. And a lot of guys do it really well where they protect, keep the defender on their hip, and then they shoot a floater or set up a pass. But you don't need to be throwing yourself backwards or sideways because that's unnatural. And that's not how you shoot. And it's not how you play within the flow of an offense. And so I like the rule and I hope that's particularly what they're targeting with the implementation.
Yeah, for me, it's less about player safety and more about enjoyment of the game. Hoping, like I said, to see them use that fantastic explosiveness, athleticism, creativity to try and put the ball in the net while the clock is still going rather than get free throws. And I like this because you start somewhere safe with something that's indisputable and easy, see how that works, and then you hopefully chip further away down the edges and see how much of that style of play you can eliminate. I think it is a really interesting problem, though, in that a lot of times when leagues want to see change, they'll implement more of a bottom up procedure. Okay, let's try putting in all these things like at lower levels of play, see how they go, and then we can implement them here. But this particular thing really is a superstar phenomenon.
Yeah.
It works exceptionally well because it's James Harden, because it's Trae Young, because it's
Mm-hmm.
Luka Doncic, because it's Kyle Lowry.
Mm-hmm.
I could go on. So even though I'm sure there's some of that going on in G League, college basketball, it's nowhere. I mean, Trae Young hit 17 free throws in game 5. We'll get there. But it's that sort of thing that it's the superstars that like they really need to target with this. So the only place you really can test and try is in the NBA. So it's going to be real time trial and error. So it makes sense they want to proceed as safely as possible in, like, let's try the smallest, most blatant target we can and then go from there.
Yeah, it's a great point that it's targeted more towards superstars, and I think primarily the ones most affected by this possible rule change would be smaller players, because that's how a lot of these guys counteract the difference in size, the difference in strength, the difference in height. Is you see when someone's trying to score a basket on Rudy Gobert, they are going right at him into his body in order to initiate that contact so that he isn't coming forward or meeting them vertically. He jumps and he starts going backward with the force of them going into him. That's how a lot of guys counteract when they're going for a layup, as an example. So with this rule, it takes away the ability of the smaller players to use that foul to create space and stop those larger players from hindering them when they're working through whatever the offensive set might be. Trae Young is so great at it because he's in a series where he's going up against Ben Simmons and Matisse Thybulle, two of the best perimeter defenders in the league. They're huge, they're long, they're all in his airspace. And so the way he counteracts that is by keeping them honest, by throwing himself into them and creating that contact, right? Because then they have to be more careful when they're guarding him. That's the little chess match. And so I see the smaller players being affected by it more, whereas Luka doesn't have to throw himself. He can just stand there and keep them on their hip because he's so big. So it'll be interesting to see what the counter adjustment is if this rule change is implemented from a Trae, from a Steph Curry, from a Chris Paul, from a Kyle Lowry, from a John Morant, all those different guys, right? From a Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley, etc. But for now, we'll see how far this type of offense can take Trae Young in the playoffs. And my guess is in the end, they probably won't change anything because a rule applying to superstars is a tough look when they're the ones who generate a lot of your revenue and people are all over the offense. But definitely something that will be considered pretty seriously.
All right. We'll follow that story closely. But for now, let's move along to some playoff action because we got a lot of craziness.